Okay, welcome to part D. I'm going to do one homework problem. So, session two, it's all about comparative advantage. Went over the lecture. I'm going to do one homework problem that's just very similar to a problem that I gave in lecture parts B and C. Here it is. It is 14. Um, and by the way, most of them I don't think are that interesting. So all I want you to do is 14 part A, 14 part F, and part G. Okay, so if you want, I encourage you to stop the video right now, see if you can do this on your own. Then I'll give you the answers, but I'm gonna actually add one extra problem to 14. Okay, so let's start off. Um, Problem 14. It says um, Gomer can make either 200 bushels of corn or 200 bushels of strawberries. Okay, Gomer, 200 corn or 200 these, and then Goober can make either 100 bushels of corn or 50 bushels of strawberries. Okay, draw the corresponding production possibility curves. Okay, so first, Gomer, this is for Gomer. So if we have corn and strawberries, okay, one, he has 200 bushels of corn, 0 of strawberries, so that's a point is right there. Another point is 200 of strawberries and 0 of corn. Okay, so these 2 points are points on the production possibilities frontier. Another one would be if he just spent, so remember, this one is where he spends 100% of his time on corn, 0% on strawberries. What if instead he spent 50% of his time on corn, which would mean he would produce 100 bushels of corn. And then if he spent 50% of his time on strawberries, 50% of that number is also 100. So another point on the production possibilities frontier is 100, 100. And it turns out, if you kept doing this exercise, all the points, once again, I cannot do a straight line. All the points on that line would be the different points on the production possibilities frontier. Okay. All right, so that's the answer to A, except that it says do the same thing for Goober. And for Goober, though, one is he could make 100 bushels of corn. Sorry, I made the scales different from before, or 50 bushels of strawberries. So those are 2 possibilities. And the same thing, any point on that line will also be in the production possibilities frontier. So that's the answer, those 2 graphs that I just made. Okay, so that's part A. Part F. Who has the comparative advantage in making corn? Okay, so now let's do the recipe that I taught you to do in the earlier videos. First, you say, well, if one of them has the absolute advantage in one task and the other has the absolute advantage in the other, then it's easy to compute comparative advantage. It's the same as the absolute advantage. The problem is we don't have that. We have that Gomer is better than Goober at both. Okay, so given that, we have to use the slightly harder technique. We have to say, let's first find the comparative, what Goober has the comparative advantage at, and we have to say which one of these is he almost as good as Gomer. And the answer is, I told you, you do a division problem. So what you do, 100 divided by 200, or 50 divided by 200. Which one is higher? The answer is 100 divided by 200. So that means Goober comparative advantage at corn. Okay, and so that means, so I told you in this class, if one person has the comparative advantage at one thing, the other person has the comparative advantage at the other thing. Okay, so that means that Gomer must have comparative advantage at strawberries. Okay, all right. So that is the answer to part F and part G. Part G, okay, yeah. Okay, now I want to add a problem to number 14. Okay, so here call it part I. The book only has A through H, so I'm going to call this question 14I. Okay, and the question goes as follows. Suppose that, okay, case 1, original case, that Gomer produces 100 bushels of corn, 100 bushels of strawberry, and Goober produces 50 bushels of corn, 25 strawberries. Okay. And suppose that neither one trades with the other. Okay. So Gomer not only produces that amount, he also consumes that amount. 100 corn, 100 strawberries. Goober, same thing. Consumes 50 corn, 50 strawberries. Okay. Describe, suppose you are a benevolent dictator. Describe new numbers for production, new amounts for production, and a way to trade that would make both of them better off. Okay. There's lots of ways of doing this, but remember the trick I told you. First, look at the one who's disadvantaged. Make him spend all of his time on his comparative advantage. Okay, so what we do, new production is the following. Before Goober could produce 100 bushels of corn or 50 of strawberry, so I said, let's make him spend all of his time on what he has the comparative advantage at, and that's corn. So now he produces 100 corn and 0 strawberries. Okay, so now let's specify a production amount for Gomer so that both can be better off. And the key is what we're going to have to do is make the total of corn be at least 150, total of strawberries be at least 125. Okay. One way to do that, let's make him produce 150 of strawberries. That way 150 is greater than 125. Okay, if he does that, he's spending 3/4 of his time on strawberries. That leaves him 25% of the time on corn. That means he can only produce 50 of corn. Okay. So, given that, how do we make, now let's specify a way of trading to make both of them better off. Well, turns out the way we've specified this, the total amount of corn is the same as before. So the key is going to be make them consume exactly the same amount of corn as before. So that means Goober needs to give 50 of his corn to Gober. So tell Goober give 50 bushels of corn to Gomer. Okay, so that will make Goober will end up with 50, Gomer will end up 100, exactly what they had before. Now let's make them both better off on strawberries, though. Tell Gomer before he had 25 of strawberries, let's give him 35 and say, tell Gomer, give 35 strawberries to Goober. Okay, then the result, if we do this, will be Gomer starts off with 50 of corn, but Goober gives him 50, so he's going to have 100 corn. And then after producing, he has 150 bushels of strawberries, but we're telling Gomer to give 35 to Goober. So 150 minus 35 is 115 strawberries. And then Goober, what does he have? Goober started off with 100 corn, but he was told to give 50 to Gomer. So he ends up with 50 corn. Then he produced 0 strawberries, but then Gomer gave him 35, so he ends up with 35 strawberries. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So we've answered the problem and would have gotten 100%. Now, there's probably a lot of different ways to do this, okay? But I just picked one. But trust me, if you get a question like this on the exam, it's always a good idea. First, you're going to have to make both of them concentrate more on their comparative advantage than before. It's much easier if you look at the guy with the disadvantage, tell him to spend all of his time on his comparative advantage. So Goober now spends 100% on corn, does nothing on the other good. And then you got to find the trade that makes both of them better off. So here's one way to do it. Give 50 corn to Gomer, tell Gomer give 50 strawberries to Goober. Once we do that, this is the result, and note that they're both better off. Both of them have the same amount of corn as before, but both of them have strictly more strawberries before. Gomer has 115 as opposed to 100 before. Goober has 35 as opposed to 35 before. So both are indeed better off. Okay, they have the same amount of corn, but strictly more strawberries. Okay, so that would be an answer to such a problem, and that would get 100% on it if I gave this to you in an exam. Okay, so that is part D. We're still in chapter 2 for session 3, which I should post in a few days. I'll just do the rest of chapter 2. Okay, so be sure to read that, and I will see you then. Okay.